What does tarot have to do with Enochian magic? Now my tarot cards here are a little off center. With my Enochian tablet of union, they would go something like that. X harp, and then the next row would be Hakama, the next row, the green row would be Nanta, and the red row would be Bitum. X harp, Hakama, Nanta, Bitum. Did that prove anything? Well, it should have illustrated something. And especially when people are starting to study their Thoth tarot, which is obviously one of the most popular tarot decks in the world, or the ones that are commercially marketed. And there's a lot of superstition that surrounds the Thoth tarot, especially among existing tarot readers who have used more traditional decks for years and years and years and are very happy with it. And they've heard such terrible things about Aleister Crowley that they immediately fear the Thoth tarot. Which everyone is welcome to do what they want, but frankly, it's pretty silly. I've had very experienced tarot readers tell me, "Ooh, I only use the Thoth deck for dark subjects." And frankly, when I first saw the Thoth deck, I was freaked out. I was sort of a youngster studying the BOTA lessons, and the artwork itself just drove me sort of crazy. It was beautiful. It's too beautiful. It was disturbingly beautiful. Oh, the devil must have had a hand in this. But anyway, there are those who really want to make an effort to understand more about the Thoth tarot, and obviously that's what I wrote, Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot, to address, because it took quite a few years for me to even be able to have enough background information to kind of even approach the treasure house, the depth of esoteric significance of the Thoth tarot, just to even start to appreciate it. And so I wrote this quite a few years ago to sort of help others maybe speed up that learning curve a little. Of course, the ultimate authority is Crowley himself in the Book of Thoth. So in a sense, this is as you're reading the Book of Thoth for the first, second, third, or 500th time, and want a little more clarity, you might want to read this one side by side with it. Okay, what does tarot have to do with Enochian magic? Because quite frankly, some of the especially the trump cards, many of the trump cards are taken from visions, or they're illustrations of visions Crowley had while doing one branch, the etheric branch of Enochian Magick. And those he chronicled, his diaries of that period, he chronicled in the vision and the voice. And the visions occurred, most of them, all but 2 or 3, I think, occurred while he and Victor Newberg were hiking across the North African Sahara. And if you haven't read The Vision and the Voice, please treat yourself. There are a series of 30 visions. And in those visions, first appear many of the characters and images and buzzwords and concepts that we'll later find in Thelemic philosophy. I mean, characters like the Scarlet Woman, even the B666, the Corone Zone, and a lot of the apocalyptic imagery, and the pantheon, literally the pantheon of the Thelemic gods, sort of crystallized in image form and concept form in these visions in the voice. And it could be a lifetime study. But when I said the etheric branch of Enochian Magick, that there's 2 main branches of Enochian Magick as developed from material left by John Dee and Edward Kelly, Queen Elizabeth I's court magician, I guess you could say, but her mathematician, her counselor. And actually, the tarot has nothing directly to do with any of the Dee and Kelly operations. You don't see Dee and Kelly back there in 1580 playing with tarot cards. Actually, you don't see them playing with Hermetic Kabbalah in a recognizable way anyway either. But the way the material was interpreted and developed by the Golden Dawn and then later Crowley clearly demarcates 2 different branches that we could say roughly identify with as the elemental branch of Enochian Magick, and that would be characterized most clearly as this master tablet of union. Now there's 4 main elements: fire, water, air, and earth, and there is a 5th element that binds them together, holds them apart. At the same time, spirit. Well, here's the 4. And Enochian likes to do things air, water, earth, fire. They put them in that order. And then there's spirit. And I think you can see them best in this way. Yeah, the white would be the spirit section of the 4 elements. And then the yellow would be the air section of the 4 elements. And the blue would be the water section of the 4 elements. And the green would be the earth subdivision of the 4 elements. And red would be the fire subdivision of the 4 elements. And those same cards, those same elements are illustrated in the aces and the court cards of the tarot in exactly the same manner. And well, here, there's the ace. Okay, and then ace. And then, how would I do this? I'm looking at things backwards. But anyway, it'd be like that. Probably out of order. And so the 4 aces would be the entire universe of that element. The Ace of Swords would be the entire universe of swords. Okay. The Prince of Swords would be the heir of air. Subdivision of the universe of swords. And the Queen would be the water subdivision. And the Princess would be the earth subdivision. Now you've noticed that there's a close-up. There's a close-up of a subangle of the Enochian system. Those are called the sub-angles of the elemental tablet. So here's the night or the fire section. Now those 4 sub-angles they live inside their ace like that, see? Okay, so that's the elemental section of, let me put this away so I don't lose them, of the Enochian system. Now there's a whole series of calls in the angelic language that open up those individual subangles and activate, if you will, the hierarchy of angels that are within those sections. And they all have names you can spell out because each of those squares is identified by a letter. So they're angel names. Okay, it's a directory. It's a phone directory of elemental spirits, and the spirits that make up those spirits, and the spirits that make up those spirits in a almost like a Transformers. One little robot becomes the arm of a bigger robot, and the arm becomes the arm of and that big robot becomes the tooth of the giant. It's a modular thing. It's fractal, if you will, of the elements. It's so cool. Not only that, but there is an entire set of calls in the angelic language that activate in your own consciousness center, activate your receptors, if you will. Angelic calls that sort of tune you up to that specific layer of consciousness, elemental consciousness, that's represented by whatever sub-element you're working with. And those calls are easily, you can find them in lots of places, but I got all of those calls in the angelic tongue right here in this book, the Tarot of Ceremonial Magic, that I talk about all the time. So that world, that elemental world of the Enochian system is represented in the tarot as the lesser arcana of the tarot, the aces, the court cards, and the small cards. And that's why you see in my Tarot of Ceremonial Magic, we see all of these different Enochian squares. And even the small cards have Enochian squares, because each one of those letters you see there is an Enochian square, a truncated pyramid with 4 sides, and the letter is on the top. And each of those 4 sides is painted an appropriate permutation of the 4 elements that give it its particular characteristic. Elemental mix. Because that's the way the whole elemental universe is. It's made up of the same chemical elements, if you will, but arranged in different proportions and ratios to make the difference between a piece of wood and water, or a piece of wood and metal, or Lon's glasses, or Lon's beard, or made up of the same stuff, only in different proportions and different ratios. All of that is simply to get to the next thing, because the next part of Enochian Magick, what Crowley was doing as he was walking across the Sahara, performing all sorts of exotic acts with Victor Newberg, and pumping his consciousness into the outer regions as far as part of Crowley's personal initiatory experience. And we all have our own personal initiatory experience, and yours won't be like Crowley's. I hope not, okay? But Crowley's also happened to coincide with what was happening with human consciousness in general in this dimension. And so we have the luxury of eavesdropping. And if we know enough about what was going on in Crowley's life and in Crowley's initiatory trajectory, we at least have a starting place to compare, to use Crowley's experience to compare it with where we are. And because part of Crowley's vision and the voice experience was coinciding with universal things that were happening to humanity as a whole, it's particularly significant for us, or it can be, if we allow ourselves to study and intuit how it applies to our own initiatory career. Now, those angelic calls that trigger the etheric section of Enochian Magick are even easier to do, because there's only really one angelic call, but there are 30 levels of consciousness that we're dealing with. They're the Aethers, or the heavens. These are the elemental universe, the in-your-face, the universe that has the car door that hurts your head when you bang it, okay? But the 30 Aethers are comparable to the 10 levels of the Tree of Life, only it's the same consciousness whole that we're dealing with the 30 Aethers, or the Tree of Life. It's the same show. We've only got one universe to work with. And the 30 Aethers are exactly the same consciousness band, if you will, from your head to Godhead, but seen in 10 broad levels, and the 30 Aethers breaks it up, that same totality, it breaks it up into 30 levels. And Enochian calls themselves are really only one call to penetrate all 30 Aethers, but it's one call with one word to distinguish one call from the other. And that's the trip Crowley was going through. That was the consciousness ladder Crowley was climbing on the walk across the Sahara. That was the onion peel of consciousness that Crowley was unpeeling in a systematic way as he crossed the Sahara. So I had the challenge when writing this book, which I knew was going to be read by people who had either tried to learn about the Thoth Tarot from this, or had been otherwise dissuaded from tackling this obviously postgraduate work. And so I had the challenge of having to write little bits of things that you should know before you try to learn anything about the Thoth Tarot. And one of those little things was Enochian Magick. And my challenge was to try in a small 2 or 3 page introduction, try to explain why the Enochian system, Enochian Magick, was important to their understanding of a deck of tarot cards. And it's a short chapter. I'm just going to read it to you right now. It's chapter 7 of Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot. Chapter 7, The Vision and the Voice. This is the secret of the Holy Grail, that is the sacred vessel of Our Lady, the Scarlet Woman, Babylon, the mother of abominations, the bride of chaos that rideth upon our Lord the Beast. That's the epigram. And if you're brave enough to read past that, here's what I say. Now we must briefly address an essential component of the Thoth Tarot that for many people demands not only an open mind, but also a great deal of spiritual courage. During his lifetime, this all-important aspect of Crowley's work was understood and appreciated only by a tiny number of his students. Unfortunately, it still remains a source of much controversy and misinterpretation. It is of particular interest to us because several of the trump cards of the Thoth Tarot are Lady Harris's dramatic rendering of a series of complex and curious visions. Visions that communicate in symbols and words the shifts of character among the titanic forces that bring an end to one spiritual age and the beginning of another. Some of these visions are intoxicatingly beautiful. Some are dark and terrifying. Some seem to wallow in blasphemies. All of them, like visions recorded by prophets of old, need a key to unlock their meaning. When he was a child, Crowley's exasperated mother called him the Beast 666 whenever she thought he was being naughty. Later in life, he would discover rich Kabbalistic significance to this term and this number, and to go on to identify his life and work with his understanding of its esoteric meaning. This is very disturbing to many people. It's understandable that anyone with a Christian background would recoil in horror when he or she first encounters Crowley's shocking use of words and imagery such as Beast 666, Scarlet Woman, All-Father Chaos, Whore of Babylon, or Blood of the Saints. While these dark, quote, blasphemies, unquote, effectively serve to screen out faint-hearted dabblers and all who choose to remain self-blinded by superstition, they offer a radiant and altogether wholesome spiritual treasure for anyone bold and tenacious enough to do a little research and a little meditation. As we discussed in the previous chapter, Crowley taught that we stand at the threshold of a new aeon, a period of profound intellectual and spiritual growth and self-realization. In order to illustrate the evolutionary forces at work at this pivotal moment, he employed a venerable but easy to misinterpret literary device. He proceeded to hijack many of the recognizable terms, images, visions, and characters of Egyptian, Hindu, Greek, Hebrew, and Christian mythology. He transmuted their character and significance in order to communicate a new message. A message for the ears of modern men and women whose rapidly expanding consciousness has now equipped them, or is in the process of equipping them, to perceive objective and spiritual realities that would be incomprehensible to the seekers of only a few generations ago. In other words, Crowley took old, terrifying concepts such as the Whore of Babylon and the Beast 666, and in his own way redeemed them to represent glorious things, as sacred and holy as the concepts of the Madonna and Child were in the Aeon of Osiris. He did this not as a cold-blooded exercise of intellectual gymnastics, but by personally experiencing, here we go, Enochian, but by personally experiencing a series of ceremonially induced visions that communicated these truths to him in a language of scriptural imagery, with which he was intimately familiar. He grew up with that shit. It gave him a vocabulary. But I digress. And that just happened to be recognizable to many others of us in the Western world. Foremost among these visions were those he experienced in November 1900, while this was before the Book of the Law, Revelation, while mountain climbing in Mexico, and between November 23rd and December 19th, 1909, while walking across the North African Sahara. A record of these 30 visions was first published as Liber 418, The Vision and the Voice. It's published in the spring of 1911 as a supplement to the Equinox. They are a source and the key to spiritual doctrines of Thelema, including the almost universally misunderstood theogony of the goddess Babylon and the All-Father Chaos. Now, you Kabbalists know that the concept of Babylon is simply that concept of the third sephira of the Tree of Life, up there in the supernal triad. Babylon, Bina, Shakti. And the All-Father Chaos is simply Hokmah, number 2 on the Tree of Life. The Beast. Beast is Hokmah, Babylon, Bina. Babylon, Bina, Shakti, Beast, Hokmah, Shiva. How could you get upset with that? Well, Crowley tries to get everybody upset anyway. Obviously these visions were intensely personal and on one level dealt specifically with Crowley's own initiatory career. On another level, one that should be particular interest to us, they were also revelations concerning the universal initiation that humanity and the world is undergoing at this pivotal moment in human evolution. He categorized these initiatory events in the same progressive order as the 10 degrees of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which represent a spiritual ascent up the tree of life. While all the degrees are important and represent levels of human consciousness, the 5th degree and the 8th degree of the Golden Dawn are major landmarks along the spiritual path of return, and Crowley makes frequent references to them in the Book of Thoth. Let's see here. In the 5th degree, the Adeptus Minor, or the Lesser Adept, the aspirant achieves union with the Holy Guardian Angel, a spiritual entity unique to each of us who, once attained, serves as our divine companion, mentor, and guide. I'll talk more about the Holy Guardian Angel in Chapter 11. Now, I'm going to pause here for a second and digress. That's major landmark in the Golden Dawn way of looking at, or the AA now, way of looking at things. If we would project that on the tarot deck, that would be leading you up to this and working with the elemental world right up to your knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. That would be on the tree of life from 10 to the doorway of 6. Not only that, but once you hit the 6, it's the entire part of the tree of life under the supernal triad. So, now the 8th degree is called Master of the Temple, is most terrible, and this is a quote from Crowley, represents the single most profound moment of our incarnations. No, excuse me, I'm quoting myself from another text. This represents the single most profound moment of our incarnation. It is faced only when the initiate has achieved a level of consciousness so high that in order to proceed farther requires the abandonment of all the old machinery of identity and perception. It means quite literally the annihilation of everything that the individual has heretofore believed to be components of personality and self. In other words, you can't take anything across the abyss that isn't the essence of you, or everything you thought you were. Now, before you throw your hands up and dismiss all this as just a complex and ridiculous delusions of a cult of 19th century eccentrics, please pause and keep in mind that terms such as Holy Guardian Angel and Abyss are simply convenient terms for universal spiritual experiences that in other times and other cultures are known by other names. Once we grasp the basic concepts, we discover that the angel and the abyss, we discover the angel and the abyss in the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Chaldean oracles, the Emerald Tablet of Hermes. We find it in Plato, Socrates, even the Old and New Testament, if you know what you're looking for. No matter how these initiations may present themselves, no matter by what name we choose to label them, every human being, indeed every unit of evolving consciousness, will eventually wed the angel and face the ordeal of the abyss. Even so, it's understandable that you would ask why any of us should be concerned with the bizarre visions of one man whose morals we may find repugnant, whose vocabulary of images are an affront to most of the world's great religions, and whose sanity is still a subject of debate. I must confess it took many years before I began to appreciate the archetypal essence of the vision and the voice, essences of the vision and the voice, and realize how extremely fortunate I was to possess such a document. Once I shed a few superstitions and fears, and carefully examined Crowley's symbolic images and words, I found it to be not only an eloquent and colorful example of one person's initiatory adventures, but also a valuable roadmap to my own spiritual journey. I wish space allowed me to discuss the vision and the voice in detail, but that has been done admirably in the vision and the voice with commentaries that Crowley wrote himself. So, okay, that's where I'm going to drop that. Now, your disinterest in Enochian magic should not discourage you in any way from enjoying and being edified by the Thoth tarot. But if you're magically inclined and are curious about some of the more intriguing details on some of the cards of the Thoth tarot, especially the trumps, you might find the being a little bit more familiar with Enochian magic, you may find it rewarding. And who knows, you may even want to take it a step further and make it part of your spiritual arsenal of tools. Anyway, that's it for today. There's a flood in the backyard. Got to deal with water. Until tomorrow, I hope. Continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.